Welcome to Parenting Different, a place where real adoption stories come to life. My name is Anna Bernacki, and this is the Parenting Different podcast. Hi, Talia. Welcome to the Parenting Different podcast. I'm so excited to have you today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about your story and your connection to adoption. I think you have such a unique story, and I'm so excited, and a unique perspective. And I'm so excited for everybody to hear your perspective on adoption today.
Yeah. So I have been a foster sister since I was just before I turned 6. So we've had a lot of kids come through our home temporarily, and then I've now got 4 siblings that our family has adopted. They're all 10 and under. And so
Oh,
we
wow.
waited a lot of years before any of our kids went to permanency. We always knew that if we were caring for a child and reunification wasn't possible, that we would pursue permanency with them. And it took a lot of years before that happened. I think we were fostering for 8 or 9 years before any of our kids went permanent. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah, since then we've had a few more. So it's been since 2019 that I've had adopted siblings.
Okay. That's absolutely crazy. So did you adopt, like, were there sibling groups that came all at once? Was it one at a time? How did that fall into
Yeah,
place?
so the oldest adopted brother that I have, he's 10, and he came in to foster care when he was a year old, and then his sister ended up coming into care when she was born, and we
Okay.
were able to adopt both of them. And then our next 2 that we adopted are also a sibling set, and it was the same thing. The older one came in first, and then his little sister came into care from birth.
Okay.
And so we're still in the process of finalizing their adoptions, but we're
Okay.
just kind of in Ontario. We have, it's called adoption placement, and so I'm not sure what it's like in the States, but it's like a 6-month, at least 6-month period where the children are just placed with us for the purpose of getting to know our family as a permanent situation, which
Sure.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter quite as much when we've been fostering them since they were born.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
still, yeah, it's standard protocol. So,
so the
yeah.
clock then starts over because in the States we have the 6 month, but it's you can, like, our time fostering counts towards that
Okay.
6 months. So
Yeah,
the
so
clock starts
ours
over
ours
when it.
starts all over. We have to start all
Okay.
over with the worker visits and everything. They do the same here when we get a foster placement. We get a 7-day worker visit, and then a 30-day, a 60-day, 90-day, and it starts all over. Once we start adoption placement, we have all those same
Wow.
worker visits again that both my parents have to be at. They don't
Oh,
talk
wow.
to us as kids as much, but when we are there, they'll kind of check in with us too. But yeah, it
Sure.
all starts over.
That's very interesting. It's so
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I mean, even in the US, like, each state has its own thing. So every state is different. So what we do, like, I'm in Illinois, so what we do in Illinois is completely different from next door in Indiana even.
Yeah,
So it's wild to hear the different uh regulations and the all the different things that they do. You would think it would be more streamlined, but
yeah,
of course it's not. We're talking about child welfare. Of course it's not.
yeah, yeah,
So how I love listening to you and hearing how this has impacted you as a bio sibling, because I think so often that is a huge concern for adoptive parents, foster parents. They always wonder, how is this going to impact my bio sibling or my biological children?
yeah, yeah,
And so, like, for me, it's kind of funny. Like, I grew up in a home where there were no biological siblings. My kids are, I don't have any biological kids. So I never
mhm,
really even thought about this, to be honest,
yeah,
which sounds weird, but it's just something that was never a thing for me.
for sure, yeah,
So, but it is a real thing for so many families. So tell me about how this has impacted you, how you have navigated some of those tough days. Anything you want to share on that. I would love to hear your perspective because that's so foreign to me. And I just would love to hear about that from you.
for sure, yeah. Um, yeah, I think the biggest thing is just our family looks so different from most of my peers.
Hmm.
So the like behaviors, the worker visits, and everything that come along before adoption is finalized with the worker visits, and continuing with behavioral challenges and diagnoses and things that could happen with
Right.
biological kids, but are just that much more prevalent with your adopted siblings who've experienced trauma. So my friends don't always understand kind of the way my family looks, and so it kind of has at times created a challenge in connecting with my peers. Um, it's much easier for me to have friends who also are adoptive siblings, who understand where I'm coming from with the things I'm saying, and
Yeah.
I don't sound as crazy when I'm talking about things. Um, so that's one of the biggest things that I would say I notice more often in my day to day life. I think when I was younger, it wasn't as big of a deal because I didn't um, always have like wasn't always wanting to like process behaviors and things that were happening because I didn't feel the need to as a younger child. Um, but as I've gotten older, and it just like it weighs differently on you when you can understand. And
Sure.
so definitely the friends that I've made who also have adopted siblings, it really helps because we can connect over some of those things and just offer support and advice to each other. Um, and yeah, it just makes such a difference when we do have a really hard trauma day, that I have people that I can talk to, who also know what a traumaversary is. Because now we've got a lot of traumaversaries in our house with all the different kids in our home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've found just being able to verbally process and things with friends really helps me get through those tough days. And I absolutely have friends who do not have adopted siblings or knowledge of these things that can absolutely be a support to me and empathize with me. But I can be a verbal processor, and so having people that I can actually talk to and bounce things off of as we're going through things um, has helped to some of those harder days and bigger behaviors I've seen from my siblings.
Yeah. Now, when you were younger, did you ever have times of, I'm sure you did, have times of jealousy when those big behaviors do come into play and your parents are completely focused on those kids who are really struggling? And sometimes those behaviors, I mean, we know it's not just a few minutes, it can last hours, days. Like it can be very, very challenging. So, how, especially when you were younger, like now you're older, you have the ability to essentially leave if you wanted to. But how did that work when you were younger and you were kind of stuck in that? And did you have times of jealousy? What did your parents do to help balance that and make you feel secure? How did that look?
I feel like as a younger kid, we always spoke about foster care and adoption really positively. So the wording that was used for me when we first started fostering was, um, we're going to help these kids out until their parents are ready to take care of them again,
Mm,
or their parents need some extra help right now, so that's why we're watching them. And when I was younger, we always had much younger kids.
mhm.
We started with 0 to 2. We ended up 0 to 5 when my youngest bio brother turned 6. And so that's kind of when, a little bit more of the attention seeking behaviors that might have been perceived as attention seeking would have come into play when we were having some of our older kids. And I do specifically remember one placement that we had. It was a 5 and 3-year-old sister set, I think, when I was around 10. And the 5-year-old was used to being the oldest girl in the house. And when she came into our home, she was the third daughter in the house.
Mm,
And I think that's something people don't talk about too, is the birth order. We kept birth order for us as bio kids, but we did not necessarily keep birth order for our foster siblings and adoptive siblings that
interesting.
were coming
Yeah.
into the home. So that caused a lot of conflict. That's the first time I really remember those feelings of jealousy. I remember one time going to my mom and saying, I don't understand why you can be so nice to them and then get me in trouble for something. And like looking back,
Yeah.
I remember like things she was getting me in trouble for, and they were completely valid because I was being like mean to them or whatever. It was valid reasons. But in the moment, it felt
Right.
like they were like prioritizing them
Hmm.
and treating them with kindness and then getting me in trouble for something. Again, for valid reasons, but as a 9 or 10-year-old, I wasn't perceiving it that way.
Sure.
And so that's the first time I really remember feeling that jealous. And we ended up like, we would stay up later than them and have a movie night with my parents or a game night or something to try to connect with my parents again and help them show us that they still care about us and they still are prioritizing us. Um, Even if in the moment when things are happening day to day, we might feel like these kids are taking a lot of their attention, because that does happen with
For
the
sure.
appointments and the worker visits and even just the needs that they're coming into the home with. But my parents were always very intentional about spending extra time with us in the evenings or while they were on visits. um, and that continued as we continued taking older kids. That those kind of times of having those sibling conflicts that we weren't having before when we were fostering babies and toddlers really came into play there.
Yeah. That that is such a I think that's something that a lot of parents are very nervous about, is how will they balance everything? Because the
Mm-hmm.
reality is foster care and adoption is intense. There are different needs
Mm-hmm.
that kids coming from trauma have, and it doesn't matter even if you're adopting an infant,
Yeah.
they still have trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that is, and wisely so, they should be considering that. But
Yeah.
overall, would you say that having these kids in your home, and maybe the hard goodbyes, the hard behaviors, the all of the all of the experiences that come with it,
Mm-hmm.
was that, looking back, a benefit to you, or was it a really negative thing for you? Because I think that's a huge fear that parents have, is
Mm-hmm.
how will my kids respond to
Yes.
this? So what is your,
Yeah.
looking back, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah. No, I was actually just working on a post actually about this, about the one of the questions I get most often is, aren't my bio kids going to resent me for this? Like, what do I do to help them not resent me and not feel like I pushed them to the side or made a decision that negatively impacted their lives?
Yeah.
And because I think there are a lot of negatives that can come with welcoming children into your home.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hard and scary things that your kids are exposed to, maybe earlier on than their peers, depending what age you start fostering with your kids or welcoming adopted children into your home, things like that. Um, but I think, um, yeah, my parents were super intentional about those things to help. And so that's one of my favorite things to talk about, because I think it can be so easy to help your kids through these situations because you can't shelter your kids forever.
Right.
And by welcoming children with higher needs and from different backgrounds and walks of life, you get to personally guide your kids through these hard experiences.
Yeah.
So they're not suddenly going out into the world at 18 with no idea, living a sheltered life, where then they've now had all of these different experiences that you as a parent have been able to guide them through and support them in when they're on their own in the real world. And that's one of the biggest things that I can kind of look back on and see is just how important that is and how beneficial it was for me in creating the person I am today. And the passions that I have are so intrinsically formed by my experiences with foster care. Like, I went to school for disability studies and social justice and peace studies. If that's not
Right.
something that has shaped me from foster care, I don't know what has. And so I can just see so many positives, as many negatives and hard things and the goodbyes and the behaviors that we saw. There's also all of the connections that we made and the good moments, the like little moments of singing around a campfire or playing a board game that just like shape you so much into the person that I have grown into today.
Yeah. And I think that what you said there too, the you can't shelter your kids forever. And I grew up in a super conservative home where, I mean, we were sheltered from everything. And so when I
Mm-hmm.
entered the world of foster care as an adult, it was shocking. And you
Yeah.
hear about things, you read the news stories, you hear, but you don't realize that these hardships and the brokenness is surrounding you
Mm-hmm.
everywhere you are. And we tend
Yes.
to live
Yeah.
in this little bubble that is just, how do you, I guess, how do you navigate sharing, like exposing, you don't want to expose your kids to the
Yeah.
pain, but also, and I think what you said was so important, like you want them to see that while they're at home and under your protection. And I think there's a
Yeah.
huge difference between, and I was actually talking about this in a recording session yesterday. It came up. There's a difference between protecting and sheltering. And I
Yes.
think, yes, we want to protect our children, but I think it's so important that to not shelter them from the realities of the world, because you can share
Mm-hmm.
that with them, help them navigate that, and create that empathy and kindness. And how can you help those around us? How can
Yes.
we get involved in our community rather than turning a blind eye? Because that's easy, right? It's easy to see the
Yes.
homeless person and say, oh, well, they should just get a job. It's
Yeah.
easy to see the mom losing her children to the foster care system and say, well, she should have done better. It's so easy to say those things, but then when you look at the brokenness and the cycles and you see what is happening in those homes and you see what is
Yeah.
happening around them and why they can't get a job, why they can't hold a job, why they're homeless, it is so eye opening. And I truly don't think that my parents did any favors by sheltering me, because I still had to go through the shock of the world as an adult.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I really truly believe that yes, we want to protect our kids. We don't want to just be like, "Oh, go see, turn them out to the streets and have them go find
Yeah.
the need." But we can navigate them and walk them through that without protecting, or without hiding it from them, is I guess what I should
Yeah.
say.
Yes, for sure. And I think my sister is 2 years younger than me, and you can see the difference in the way she was raised and the things she was exposed to and taught to work through in the way that she's working now. So she's working as a lifeguard in the, I would say, the rougher end of our town. And so there's a lot of high needs, high behaviors, things that come up that you wouldn't see in a, middle class family, because
Hmm.
these kids have gone through a lot of the things that our siblings that have come into our home have gone through, and the kind of family structures. And you can see the way she responds with empathy and grace compared to her peers responding with judgment and why couldn't they just, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because we all want to raise good humans. I don't think any parent says that, oh, I don't care. We all want to raise good
Yeah.
humans and good successful who kids who will turn into good successful adults, and we want that kindness
Yeah.
and empathy. And that I think that exposing our kids to the brokenness of this world is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good
Yes.
thing. And that is such
Yeah.
a big fear that parents have. Oh, it'll ruin my kids. I mean,
Hmm.
clearly you're not ruined. So I think it's just really important to go all in and not be afraid of that, while also being very intentional and very aware
Yes.
of what is happening and how
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
connect with your kids. So how, I mean, you
For
touched
sure.
on that a little bit. How did that look over the years? Like you said almost 6 when you first started
Yeah.
fostering. How did your parents throughout the years, as you got older, your siblings were younger, when you started
Yeah.
fostering, how did that look and that intentionality look throughout the years?
Yeah. So, yeah, when we first started fostering, it was really easy to have intentional time with us because we were having babies and toddlers. They were going to bed earlier,
Hmm.
albeit we were younger and going to bed earlier too. But there were visits that we would use. My parents would, while they were on a visit, take us out to a park or something and help us just connect with them one on one, or often, the three of us with my mom or my dad. And I don't think it has to be one on one for your
Sure.
kids to feel that
Yeah.
connection. Um, and then as we got older and we kept kind of welcoming older and older kids into our home, it obviously had to change how we made that time. So for a lot of the time, we were still able to, connect after they went to bed or whatever. But after we finalized my first two siblings adoption, we ended up fostering teenagers. And so while I was a teenager. And so obviously there's not like a they go to bed and we connect
Right.
after they go to bed. So it became a lot more intentional of like, while they were at another program, if they did like, horseback riding lessons, or when they went on a visit, that's when we would connect with my siblings that are um, adopted now. Same kind of thing. Again, they're younger, so there's often that time after they go to bed, but also when they're at another program. If they, like my one sister, she's doing horseback riding lessons right now, so that provides an opportunity for my parents to focus on another one of us. It can be as simple as, going out grocery shopping. It doesn't have to be a big elaborate show of your affection to them. It can be as
Sure.
simple as the mundane daily tasks, making dinner together. There's just so many little ways that you can stop and connect with your bio kids in the moment when your adopted or foster children have so much higher needs in most cases than your bio kids.
Yeah. And I know you touched on the higher needs with your friends, and how
Yeah.
that impacted your friendships. How did that impact you, in that moment of listening to the screaming, or, just having so much of a distraction, and not even necessarily just taking your parents away from you, but how did that impact you living in that environment where it was sometimes unpredictable and
Yeah.
difficult to navigate? How did that impact you?
Yeah. I think it could often feel like we were walking on eggshells
Mhm.
in our home, trying, to just like cater to whatever sibling was having a harder time at the moment. And we especially see this around kind of their traumaversaries. So when they came into care, when something major happened in their life, or whether that be with visits after they came into care, when visits ended, or maybe it was something that happened in their life before they came into foster care. So there's definitely a few times a year where we really feel like we're walking on eggshells to
Yeah.
really cater to whatever kid is struggling. And sometimes that's hard because it's such a different expectation for myself as a 10 or 12-year-old compared to this sibling as a 10 or 12-year-old. And especially when I was younger, I had a harder time with this. We had one teen who he did not want to be adopted, but he lived in our home. I think he came when he was 15. I think it was about 3 years that he lived in our home. And we're still connected with him. We're still involved. He ended up he aged out and
Okay.
he stayed with living in our home until he went to college.
Okay.
And so my mom is still texts him. He still comes over sometimes, whatever. But his needs were so different than mine, and he was only a year younger than me and a year older than my sister. So he was right in between my next sister and I, and just the expectations that were so different. And as like me as a 16-year-old seeing this, that's where it was really hard for me,
I'm sure.
and seeing those things and the way we would cater to him differently than our needs. And so that was a really big eye opener for me, and just like really recognizing the difference between myself as a child who has grown up in a stable home, other than, foster kids coming in and out and things like that. My life was stable, it was
Hmm.
predictable, in terms of my parents were supportive, my parents were there, my grandparents, my support systems, compared to him who had not grown up that way and had some higher needs because of that. And that was really the first time that I saw just how different our lives could be as such close in age, just the expectations placed on us, even with things like school, um, were just so different. And that was a big eye opener for me, and something I struggled with more, I think, in having someone so close to my age.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be hard having close to your age. Now, one thing that you have mentioned multiple times that I think it's really important to talk about too is the traumaversary. I've actually never heard it. I've never heard that term. I love that. I'm
Okay.
going to use that now. Like I'm very aware of the concept, but I've never
Yes.
like I have my own, but I've never heard that term and I love that. So,
Hmm.
what would maybe you can talk through what is a traumaversary? How do you look for those changes in the kids? Why are we walking on eggshells? Like how
Hmm.
explain that a little
Sure.
bit and maybe go into how you guys handle that in your home and how you navigate through those.
Yeah. Yeah. So in our house, and we are talking about a traumaversary, it is often the time that they came into foster care,
Hmm.
or came into our home, is where we notice it. So it's their trauma anniversary.
Yeah,
Um, and we just combine the two words. So,
I love it.
um, yeah, yeah. So we especially notice that there's, every every kid in our home, and we have the four that we've adopted, and then three more that we're fostering. And so basically every year when they came into our home, we see a change in behavior. um, so one of my siblings is in June, which is also a busy month with things like school ending.
Yeah.
In Ontario, we end at the end of June, but this child came into care at the beginning of June. And so every year they will start having behaviors, um, meltdowns, and challenges. And we see more of the like reverting back to behavior that we haven't seen in a long time. So at this time, especially, we see like you almost have to cut their age in half, and you
Mm.
say, okay, I wouldn't feel this way if a 2-year old was doing this, or if a 4-year old was doing this. But we get back to kind of the same like yelling and shouting, throwing things, slamming doors that we don't see throughout the rest of the year. So every year it tends to sneak up on us, and then one day we're like, what is going on? This is the biggest meltdown this child has had in months. And then we realize
Yeah,
that that's why. And it on one hand allows us to extend a lot more grace to this child,
sure.
because we know that each of our children is going through this at a different time of the year, and it's a very valid reason and a big trauma that they experienced. um, But yeah, it can feel like we are really walking on eggshells around them, meaning be as careful around them as we can so we don't accidentally set them off, because we don't always know what is going to be a trigger for them,
Yeah,
because it can change year to year, day to day. It can be very unpredictable time for them, and it's really just we see their brain go back into fight or flight, and
yeah,
it's just that heightened um, need for, constant attention and comfort and love, to show them like we're still here for you, we're not going anywhere. And also just um, knowing how many big emotions their brain is trying to process as a child.
Yeah. And I think it's really important too to talk about like they aren't calculating the date and
Hmm.
doing this on purpose. Like this is
Yeah,
their nervous system, their bodies remember, they don't realize what is happening. And I think as they
exactly.
get older, I know with my older kids, there are times I'll be like, okay, hey, we need to talk, time out. Like, let's
Hmm.
remember what's going on this time of year. We can talk it
Yeah.
through. Where when they're younger, I mean, they
Hmm.
don't, sometimes they're so young, they don't consciously remember actually
Yeah,
what happened. So,
exactly.
yeah, I think it's important to remember that too, that this isn't like, oh, it's June, time to act up.
Yeah,
Like this
exactly.
is this is they're just remembering this. Now, I struggle and I don't think a lot of adoptees understand, or not a lot of adoptees talk about this, and a lot of adoptive parents don't realize that how ingrained in our bodies this is, because they think that if you were adopted as an infant it's a clean slate. But for
Hmm.
me, like around my birthday, I'll start really struggling. And even to
Hmm.
this day, I still really struggle leading up to my birthday. Like I get really
Yeah.
kind of almost like this depression. I'm like, what is going on? Why do I feel like this?
Hmm.
Why do I have this
Yeah.
hopeless feeling? This is so dumb. And then I remember, oh, it's my
Yeah.
birthday. And it took me years of this pattern of why am I
Hmm.
experiencing this, to then go,
Yeah.
oh, I think this is because I was separated at birth. Like I was
Hmm.
born and removed. And so that
Yeah.
is, I don't remember that day. I don't sit there and
Right.
say, oh, well, that today's the day, the last, like that's
Hmm.
not something that I remember and I can calculate. But even as an adult, my body still remembers every single year. And
Yes.
so I think it's really important for adoptive parents to understand that these things will happen, and yeah, we just need to know we're safe, wanted,
Hmm.
valued, like, and
Yes. Yeah.
I think as they get older, acknowledge that. I think acknowledging
Yes.
this is a, use that term, this is a traumaversary, that this time
Hmm.
really sucks
Yeah.
and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What can we do? Let's work together on this. Let's get through it
Yeah.
together. um
Yeah.
and I really like what you said too about cutting the age in half. I think that
Hmm.
is so important. I'm going to use that with my kids because it would help, because there are
There's
times,
days it's so helpful.
it is, because there are times I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, guys, you're too
Yeah.
old for this.
Yes.
But in reality, when those traumaversaries happen, they revert back
Mhm.
to that age and that
Yeah.
they were when the trauma happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I think acknowledging that with your bio kids too and explaining that to them too,
Yeah.
is really important because, like, for me and my two bio siblings, we don't have traumaversaries
Right.
really. Um, I would say there's a few goodbyes and things that we had in foster care that were like a small trauma as well,
Hmm.
but not to the same extent as a complete removal from um, their family like my siblings
Right.
experienced. And so explaining using these words to your bio kids to explain to them, why their siblings are acting this way in a way that obviously respects the dignity of your adopted or foster children who are struggling this way. But just, really using that terminology and not being afraid to explain it to your kids so that they understand and they're also able to support
Yeah.
their siblings through these big emotions and things like that.
Yeah. I think honesty is so important. And I always talk about this in regards to adoptees. Always be honest
Hmm.
about your kid's story. Even if it's ugly, they're going to find out someday anyway.
Yeah.
Age appropriately
Yeah.
honest, obviously.
Yes.
But
Yes.
telling them their story. And I mean, one of my kids asked about their dad the other day, and I looked at them, they're old enough to know what prison is. And so I had to say, your dad's in prison, and like they had
Yeah.
just kind of realized that, because they've never met their birth dad. And so they just kind of realize that
Mm-hmm.
they have a dad out there too, somewhere, what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're putting the pieces together. And so I'm not going to tell him why he's there, how long he's there,
Yeah.
all of that stuff. But I can at least say, made some bad choices and that's why he's there. And, oh, well, why haven't I met him? Because he's not safe. And you can be honest and age appropriately honest. And I think that's so important. And also, not just with your foster or adoptive kids, but also with your bio kids.
Mm-hmm.
Be honest about their kid story. Because if you're sheltering them from that, then the favoritism or that jealousy or resentment can just build. Where if you're
Yeah.
honest, then at least there's an explanation for why this is happening in
Mm-hmm.
our home.
Exactly. And when we had these things explained to us, it just made everything click for us. So sure, there were still big feelings sometimes of like
Sure.
you're focusing on them, not on me, but having that explained to us in age appropriate terms as we grew up was so helpful for us in seeing like, okay, this is why mom's focusing more on this kid right now. This is why this kid is acting this way and needing some more of that attention.
Yeah.
And not that meant we were not able to get attention from my parents at all, because they always emphasized like you can still come to us. We're never too busy for you. But we're never too busy for you was for all of the kids in our home.
Yeah.
And so it was, we had to learn to share our parents. And was that hard sometimes? Yes. But when it was explained to us why, it helped a lot to understand, what was really going on in our siblings' brains.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure. So this has been absolutely awesome. I am so, so glad we got to have this conversation. I think this is such an important conversation for adoptive parents to listen to, or prospective adoptive parents as they're navigating and trying to decide when is the right time. Do we do this now? How do we work through this with our bio kids? What would be something that you want to leave our audience with? What is kind of
Yeah.
the last thing that you would like to say, and like the most important thing that you want to make sure is communicated?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing is just don't be afraid to step into being a foster adoptive parent if you have bio kids. As long as you continue to prioritize your kids' needs alongside your other kids' needs, your kids are going to grow up with so many benefits from the experiences that they have. And yes, it feels scary to step into a foster adoptive family role with your bio kids, but there is just so much your kids can learn and love that they can share. And I really truly believe that it shaped me into the person I am today. And I don't resent my bio parents for that. I don't resent them for bringing other kids into our nuclear family. And that's because there's ways to support your bio kids through these big experiences. And yeah, I really can't emphasize enough that you don't have to be afraid of fostering and adopting because you have bio kids in your home.
I love this. Thank you so much for being willing to share your story and share with others. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.